My name is Reverend Tracy Blackman.
I'm Barbara Pfeiffer.
I'm Maharat Rory Pickernese.
I'm Rabbi Jim Bennett.
I am the Reverend Molly Hausch-Gordon.
I want to be a part of this lawsuit because I am a person of faith. I've dedicated my life to teaching and living by the ministry of Jesus. And I feel that I am obligated to stand up for women and birthing people and their families whose rights have been taken away in this moment.
I want to be a part of this lawsuit for multiple reasons. I have experienced problematic pregnancies, and I know what can happen when the state gets involved. I ended up for 5 weeks carrying a dead fetus. The medical professionals knew it was dead, but because of the laws in the state of Missouri, they were unwilling to do anything about it. I could have died very easily.
I feel really honored to be part of this lawsuit because what I see happening across this country as religion is used as an excuse to take away individual rights of people. I feel scared by that. I feel scared as a person who's capable of getting pregnant and whose life can be endangered by that. I feel scared as someone who's Jewish who doesn't see my religious tradition reflected. And I feel scared as a citizen of this country seeing civil liberties under attack. And so I want to be part of that solution. I want to be part of speaking out and saying that that's not who we are as Americans. That's not who we are as religious people. And that's not who we should be as a society.
This lawsuit is important, and I believe in being a part of this action because we need to raise consciousness of this issue and move this issue out of the realm of simply people's opinion, people's knee-jerk reactions to an issue, and people imposing their own religious beliefs on others. And we need to make it clear that there are many people in the state of Missouri who are being disrespected and whose faith and whose rights as citizens in the state of Missouri is being disrespected by these new restrictive laws.
I'm excited to be a part of this lawsuit because I believe so passionately in the moral agency of the people of Missouri and in their God-given right to bodily autonomy. And my dearest hope is that this lawsuit is successful in challenging and I hope eliminating the ban that oppresses people's bodies and denies their religious freedom and reproductive freedom. I also hope that this lawsuit helps change the public narrative around religion and abortion. It is not the case that the religious point of view is to oppose abortion. I am a deeply faithful person and I joyfully support abortion access.
Abortion is a private matter that should be the concern of a family, centering the birthing person, making a decision about what is best for their lives. My faith informs this decision because my faith teaches me that from the very beginning of creation, God has been a God of choice. The United Church of Christ believes in the human dignity of every being, the right to make one's own decisions about life, and to be informed by faith in the way God speaks to you. That has not changed from the beginning, and it will not change with this decision.
Abortion access is crucial. It's crucial from a health care perspective. It's also crucial in terms of recognizing the full citizenship and autonomy of women. If there is not abortion access, women are not full citizens, and they are not fully recognized as God's creatures. I am United Methodist. In our context, the issue of abortion is not really considered an essential part of our theology or doctrine. And so you find a diversity of opinion within the United Methodist Church. In general, we say that women have the priority.
Judaism has very different views on when life begins and what is life-saving healthcare than other faith traditions might have. The Talmud goes through many conversations. Our oral tradition has much discussion about recognizing that carrying a fetus is an incredibly dangerous endeavor. We know that throughout history and even into today, there are many people who don't survive pregnancy. And so our tradition emphasizes that if there's ever a situation where we know that the life of the person carrying the fetus is endangered by that pregnancy, then not only should they, but that they're obligated to terminate that pregnancy and preserve the life that is already in existence. So while our tradition recognizes that pregnancy is not something that we take lightly, it also is very much recognized as something that is a risk to the person who is pregnant and something that we need to take careful consideration to ultimately value the life of the person who's carrying that fetus.
I believe that every person has autonomy over their own body. And so I believe that every person who can become pregnant should also have the right to determine the fate of that pregnancy. And therefore, I think people should have the right to freely choose whether to carry a pregnancy to full term or whether, within reason, at a time that is appropriate to terminate that pregnancy. As far as how that belief in individual freedom and autonomy grows out of and emanates out of my personal faith as a Reformed Jew, I believe deeply Reformed Judaism is founded on the principle of personal autonomy. Every human being born into this world is born with the right to dignity and freedom and autonomy over ourselves, over our bodies, and over our lives. And so the Reformed Jewish tradition strongly and unequivocally supports the right of people to choose. We do believe that life is sacred, and we also believe that unborn fetus is not yet a full human being, and therefore a person who becomes pregnant should have the right to determine whether they wish to carry that pregnancy to full term. Reformed Judaism, on the basis of a long interpretation and understanding of Jewish tradition, believes that that is a position that's consistent with Jewish faith and Jewish values. And so therefore, not only as an individual, but also as a Reformed Jew and as a rabbi, I believe that reproductive freedom and choice is consistent with my religious faith.
As a Unitarian Universalist minister, it is part of my faith that personal conscience is a key faculty that all humans are divinely gifted with, and that each person must be a moral agent in their own life. And therefore, I strongly, from a faith perspective, support full access to abortion. I also know that abortion is simply healthcare, that it is a often necessary medical procedure that is common and safe, and that allows people access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care that they need in order to be healthy. And as a matter of faith, I believe that people deserve access to every kind of health care that their body needs to be healthy. We see in our faith tradition the way that great teachers have cared for others as a part of their practice of faith, and we believe that care, no matter what, is an incredibly important part of what it means to be human together.
The separation of church and state protects everyone. It protects our religious freedoms, and it protects our reproductive freedoms, including the right to abortion. But it goes even further than that. The reason that separation of church and state is necessary is because we all have the right to our own faith beliefs. And our freedom with our faith ends where freedom for someone else begins. What I mean by that is that no one should have the right to impose their beliefs on another. I believe that religion has its place and government has its place. By keeping a separation between church and state, we ensure everyone's freedom to worship as they see fit and to live their lives as they see fit.
One of the distinctive things about the American experiment when we began as a country was this idea of separation of church and state. It was such a radical idea at the time. And it has been, I believe, part of the genius of America. Whenever we begin to say that people must conform to a certain kind of religion, we begin a long, slow, or rapid slide toward autocracy. Freedom of expression and freedom of religion are absolutely intertwined. If we are not free to live our lives in our own way, in terms of our faith, we're not a free people. I'm proud to be a part of a country that has fostered a separation between church and state. It needs to be a very bright line, something that our founders, many of whom probably were problematic in other ways, understood very clearly because they saw it in their own lives.
Separation of church and state is a core element of our democracy, and it's at the very foundation of what it is for us to be a minority within this country. For so many years, our Jewish community has not been allowed to be citizens of the countries in which we've lived. We've not been allowed to participate in the government or democratic processes, and that has led to persecution against the Jewish people, to being forced out of countries in which we've lived. And so in America, it has been foundational to our existence here that no one religion can be established and that no one religion has priority over any others. I can't overemphasize the impact that the separation of church and state has had on what it has meant for the Jewish community to thrive in this country in ways that the Jewish community has not been able to do for literally thousands of years.
Well, I grew up in the United States of America always understanding and believing, being taught that this was a nation that was founded by those who believe deeply in the separation of church and state. And as the laws of our country have evolved, that we have grown even more deeply committed to that wall of separation. And so I believe that it is almost self-evident that personal belief, a conviction about when life begins and who has the right to determine the fate of my body is very much based in part on religious principle and values, but that nobody has the right in a nation founded on the separation of church and state to force their personal religious beliefs and convictions upon another person. And so this is one of those issues that most poignantly demonstrates the importance of the separation of church and state. People whose religious convictions tell them that they should not terminate a pregnancy have every right to practice their faith. And people whose religious convictions tell them that they have the freedom and autonomy to determine the destiny of their own body equally have the right to determine and to make those choices for ourselves. A nation founded on separation of church and state cannot possibly allow anybody's religious convictions, anybody's religious principles, anybody's values to determine what another person might do in their own life.
Separation of church and state is essential for reproductive justice because we have seen that a very small and particular faith perspective has been enshrined in law in our state in a way that threatens every other faith tradition. And so we see that for bodily autonomy to be exercised, we really need to take that voice out of the center and make sure that there is a plurality of voices, which we can only do when there is a separation of church and state. So Missouri's abortion ban has enshrined a very particular fundamentalist vision of Christianity that is antithetical to many people of faith, and that is certainly antithetical to my faith. What really has happened with the Missouri abortion ban is that a small group of practitioners of a certain faith have imposed their faith perspective on the entire state and the bodies of the people of the entire state in a way that limits bodily autonomy, which my faith tradition lifts up as sacred, and in a way that takes away people's moral agency in a way that my faith tradition lifts up as sacred. And so this ban has particularly impinged upon the freedom of people of my faith tradition to practice our beliefs in the moral agency of every person and the sacredness of bodily autonomy. So for me, one of the most important things about religious freedom and why separation of church and state is inherently necessary to religious freedom is that religious freedom requires that everyone be able to equally practice their faith principles. And when one particular theological perspective becomes enshrined in law, when the separation of church and state crumbles, that means that the capacity of others to practice their faith principles crumbles as well. And so the freedom of religion is not the freedom to impose your religion upon others, but it is the freedom to have a diverse and pluralistic community where everyone is able to exercise their religious freedom within the context of a pluralistic and diverse community and within that interaction with one another without one kind of smashing down the others.
I do not believe that it is ever okay for state legislators to use their power to impose their views on anyone. The state legislators are elected by the people. So the office of the legislator is not an office of personal opinion or personal power. It is a representation of the collective power of the people, and it should only be used in that regard.
It is absolutely wrong for state legislators to use their power to try and impose their religious beliefs on other people.
Missouri's abortion ban impedes on my religious freedom. It's not what Judaism says about abortion. It's not what Judaism says about pregnancy or conception. To ban abortion by saying that life begins at conception is a theological statement, and it's not my theology.
I think that it's actually wrong for a legislator to factor in their own personal religious principles. Of course, everybody should act on their religious principles in their private and personal life. But when it comes to the responsibility of those elected to public office for making laws that fairly and appropriately impact all the citizens of a state, it's actually incumbent upon them to exercise and to respect the separation of church and state, to explicitly not impose their own religious principles on others. No state or other government entity should use religious principles to pass laws. In a country that is committed to the separation of church and state should not possibly allow legislators to dictate the laws of the country based upon anybody's religious principles. And I'm pretty confident in my understanding of the recent abortion restrictions that have been passed in Missouri, that those making and legislating these new restrictions have imposed their own religious principles upon all the citizens of the state of Missouri. And as a citizen of the state of Missouri, as a taxpayer in the state of Missouri who believes that my freedom is protected by our state's constitution, it's my understanding that they have done something that is actually wrong. And that's why I believe that this law is wrong. It restricts my freedom and the freedom of others whose religious principles do not coincide with the religious principles that caused them to enact this law in the first place.
It is absolutely unacceptable for state legislators to impose their religious views on the rest of us. We are a diverse state full of people of many different beliefs and life experiences. That difference is sacred and holy. And when legislators impose their beliefs upon the rest of us, that difference is denigrated, that difference is denied its dignity, and all of us are made less free.